As I've mentioned before, I'm a small business owner, and what I love more than anything is to see another company succeed so well. See, the Christopher Ward 12, I think, is actually a true contender in integrated sports watches. Now, I'll liken this only partially to someone like Tesla with the Cybertruck or Jaguar with their recent entry. The Christopher Ward 12 is a bold entry from the brand that kind of is a little polarizing, but shows what the brand is capable of doing. You see, there's a huge amount of competition in integrated sports watches these days, and this is entering that market, but I think with a sort of a design of its own, although it is borrowing from a lot of others, as well as obviously hitting the things that Christopher Ward's always done so well, which is a high level of craftsmanship, thoughtful design, and pretty decent value, although we can talk about that a little bit later. The 12, I think, stands toe-to-toe with a lot of the other watches in its price category. Now, what's interesting is if you think about Christopher Ward of 5 years ago versus Christopher Ward of today, it feels entirely different. You know, when I think of Christopher Ward of 5 years ago, I think of all the different brand names and the constantly changing logos that were, I think there are 3 or 4 different iterations of which. And now they're just going stride after stride, where they released this model variant at an incredible price point. For a watch company that's predominantly done homage variants of other popular watches at a good price point, and even after that sold on eBay for about half that price with changing logos, Christopher Ward is doing amazing things and has really struck out on their own. And this, I think, was one of the first moments of that. Now, the Christopher Ward 12X here in titanium is a striking design and has this incredible integrated bracelet with some great finishing. And I think that is by far the standout feature. The integrated bracelet here flows seamlessly into the angular 41mm titanium case. It has this faceted bezel on the outside with its dodecagonal shape, which is the name 12, that's where it comes from, and the faces that are on the exterior of this bezel is bold without feeling overdone. While it's there, it's minimal enough to the point where it doesn't, shout for attention. They could have made it a lot thicker and it would have really called attention to itself, but as it sits now, you only notice it occasionally as you move the watch and light reflects off of it. This watch to me feels like a brand saying, hey, I'm here. It's calling attention to itself. It's saying, I can make watches with great finishing. I can make watches with great finishing in titanium, and I can make them look just as good as a lot of the really big luxury providers that are out there. I mean, if you look at an AP Royal Oak with an open dial design like this, you're really looking at several tens of thousands of dollars. So it begs the question, what are you paying for? While this watch is really well made, it actually reminds me less of an AP and more of someone like Oris, because Oris came out with their ProPilot X series, if you remember, where it had that open work design. And then they came out with their variants, this ProPilot X variant that I'm holding here, also in titanium, where it basically highlighted the same new movement that now has a 10-year warranty. I feel like Christopher Ward took a page out of their book and said, well, we'll come out with our own open work variant and then come out with our own standard variants underneath that line with their standard 12s, which you can buy again in titanium or stainless steel. And that, I think, is what they were looking more at than someone like AP, though there have been a lot of comparisons to AP as well, just because it's an integrated sports watch. Now, what I really love about this is the finishing and the look of this whole thing. I think these hands look incredible and have these facets on them that you wouldn't otherwise expect to see, while still maintaining the heritage of the hands that you would typically expect on a Christopher Ward. I think the open work design here and where they place these bridges and how they chose which ones in black, which ones to have a brush finish on them, how to expose each of the barrels where the barrels themselves are see-through, and the custom black rotor on the back with the name Christopher Ward on it. I think the details that you find here, even in this screw-on crown guards and the crown itself, really feel elegant, really feel luxurious. Does it feel like 20 grand if you're comparing it to something like AP? I don't think so, but for $5,000, I think it does compete quite well with many of the other watch designs that you see at that price point. Is it the best value in the world? I don't think so. Again, I think you can buy something from Oris around the same price point and you would expect the same or similar style finishing as you do from Christopher Ward. But what I think it does is it takes Christopher Ward's expected value of a watch that's usually around $1,000 into more of the $5,000 price range. Now, obviously, the Bel Canto is a whole other conversation as to how they've differentiated themselves from a lot of their competitors. And this isn't to knock the price. I think the price is fair for what you're getting. I'm just not saying that it is the best value in the world. I think that might be overstating it a little bit. Now, it still has a lot of the other features you're expecting from a modern watch. I have all the specs on the screen where you can see the diameter, the thickness, it's relatively thin. Obviously, the weight at almost 100 grams with the bracelet included, only 51 grams with just the head. You have an incredibly wearable package here. I think if I put this on and wore it every single day, I'd basically never notice that I was wearing it. Even as I'm wearing it now, it feels as though I'm not wearing the watch at all. And for a relatively large watch, I think that's a big compliment. I do think aesthetically it is gorgeous. I'm not usually someone for skeleton or open worked dials, but I think this one is really well done and something that maybe I would consider. Again, I don't know how often I would wear it, but it isn't something that I would pass on. I would definitely consider trying this on if I were you. I also love the fact that you can, because it's open worked and no dial, basically, I love the fact that you can see the keyless works, you can see the setting lever, you can see yourself interacting with the motion works and actually changing the hand position. I think all of that is fantastic and something that, is just really cool, especially for someone that's really into the mechanics of the watch like myself. I think it's a really neat function to have. Now, as we're talking about seeing the watch and the movement in action, you have to talk about the movement itself. This is powered by the SH21, which is a Christopher Ward made movement. Now, the movement came from a company called Synergies Urologies, which I know I'm mispronouncing, but I'll write it down below. They merged with Christopher Ward in 2014. And at that time, Christopher Ward then announced their in-house caliber SH21, which is produced by this company. And that's where the SH come from. And the 21 represents the 21st century. Now, what that says to me is, one, wow, good for Christopher Ward, but also, I don't think we can consider them a micro brand at all anymore if they're doing the volume to the point where they can buy someone who makes movements and actually makes a lot of movements like the SH21 for brands like Meistersinger, for example. So generally, what do I love? The watch design, I think, is fantastic. It strikes a perfect balance between a familiar integrated sports watch and a design that's fresh, original in some of its details, while a little derivative to some of the other companies that are out there doing something similar. I love the dodecagonal bezel. I love the skeleton nature of this, that I can see everything happening inside the watch with so much detail. I love the fact that the whole thing is made out of titanium and super light. The facets on this bracelet are beautiful. It's comfortable. It fits so well. I wish that we had a little on-the-fly adjustment, a little bit, but I don't know that I need it because it's so light. It never feels like it's squeezing down that much. The butterfly closure on the back here, I think, is just a nice touch with the name. You just have a gorgeous looking watch that is still very much Christopher Ward. And I really like that. Something else I really love is the fact that they have these integrated quick release spring bars for the bracelet. So most of the time these integrated bracelet watches have a tiny spring bar and you have to make sure you don't lose that tiny spring bar. But the fact that they have these quick release spring bars built into the case of the watch means it's super easy to then just take the bracelet off. And it makes it less cumbersome if you do end up buying replacement straps to use, because obviously integrated sports watch means it needs to have an integrated bracelet, but at least it makes it simple and easy when you do need to make that change. And so about negatives for the watch, I don't really have that many because, I think things that they could have done differently. I wish there was a micro adjust here in the butterfly closure. I'm still not sure how anyone's going to achieve that on a butterfly closure versus a single lock closure. And I would be kind of okay with a single lock closure if it added that function. I always like on the fly adjustment these days. I'm spoiled that way. I wish it was maybe a millimeter smaller. I'm getting real nitpicky here because there's not really that much that I don't like about this watch. I wish that the chapter ring, which has the indices noted on there, was just a little bit brighter. I don't know if they could take that white and knock it up a few notches or add more to it, but it does make it difficult to read, or the indices could have been a little longer. It just makes it a little difficult to read every so often, but I think that's kind of par for the course with most skeleton dials. So at that point, really the only negative is you may not like the aesthetic. You may not like the skeleton look. You may not like, some of the features on here, or you may not like integrated sports watches in general. And so if that's the case, then obviously this watch isn't for you. But for me, as someone who typically finds integrated sports watches to be okay, I don't love them, but they're nice every so often, and who is surprised at how much I like the skeleton dial here, I think this does have a great aesthetic and something you should definitely look into if you like Christopher Ward or you're interested in something like this. But what do you guys think about this watch specifically, or Christopher Ward's branding in general these days? I want to say thanks to them for lending this in. I don't get to keep it. There's no money exchanging hands, but it is nice to have them send it over to me for me to be able to take a look at it. There aren't that many brands that let you do that sort of thing, so that's always very nice. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.